She didn't scream. She whispered. She smiled. She helped. And by the time I realized she was rewriting me, I'd already handed her the pen. I lost everything, my job, my name, my mind. All to someone who never raised her voice, never forced my trust. She earned it. This isn't just a story about being manipulated. It's about what happens when you become the very thing you feared. I'm not telling this to warn you. I'm telling this because I need you to listen. Before she finds someone else. Before you become someone else. If you think you've heard it all, you haven't. Hit follow on your favorite platform now, because the next story might just change the way you see everything. Don't miss a single twisted turn. The smile behind the mask. They say hindsight is 20/20, but they never tell you how blind trust can make you see exactly what you want and ignore every shadow trying to warn you. If I had trusted my gut instead of her grin, I wouldn't be sitting here, staring at a bank account I don't remember opening and a file folder that holds the digital footprint of a man I don't recognize. And the name on that folder? Mine. It started, as these things always do, with a smile. Lara smiled like she already knew the end of the story. She walked into my office the way people walk into their own kitchens, casual, familiar, like she belonged. She didn't ask questions. She answered the ones I hadn't spoken aloud. "Rough morning," she said that first day. "They really don't let you breathe in this place, do they?" I hadn't even looked up from my screen, but she already knew. That's how it begins, the illusion of being seen. Not ogled, not observed, understood. The first lie you believe in any manipulation is the idea that someone truly gets you. And the second, that it's safe to let them. She wasn't flashy. Lara wore confidence like armor, soft-spoken, tailored suits, no perfume. She always stood just a little farther than most people do, just enough to make you lean in. Everything about her made you feel like you initiated the connection. The moment you lean, you've already lost. She asked if I needed help with the new compliance reporting software. Said she had some tricks to make the back-end dashboard run faster. Tricks. That's the word I missed. That first week, she fixed 3 spreadsheet errors, reorganized the shared drive, and caught a minor security flaw in our account lockout protocol that IT had apparently missed for 7 months. I joked that she was a magician. She smiled. "No," she said. "Magicians show you what you want to see. I just take away what's in your way." The day she brought me coffee, just the way I like it, 1 sugar, no cream. I didn't ask how she knew, but I should have, because it wasn't coffee. It was calibration. From the start, Lara was studying me, tracking my habits, my speech patterns, my tells, the words I hesitated on, the topics that made my throat tighten. She made mental notes every time I sighed, every time I clenched my jaw during meetings. And when she spoke, her voice was tuned to match mine, in rhythm, in tempo, even in tone. It wasn't flattery. It was mirroring, and I took the bait. I started relying on her, without ever formally asking for help. She'd pick up where I left off, send reminders before I even opened my calendar, finish sentences I hadn't realized I was fumbling through. She made me feel efficient. That was her real trick. Manipulators don't waste time overpowering you. They just make you more comfortable when you're too tired to notice the walls are closing in. It was around that point I started hearing her name from other departments. "She's sharp," someone from finance said. "Bit intense," HR muttered. "She's a fixer," my director claimed. Fixer. Right. She was fixing everything, including the things that weren't broken. 3 weeks in, I found her sitting at my desk before I arrived, going through invoices. Not just current ones. Archived. "Didn't mean to pry," she said casually, "but I noticed a few things out of order. You might want to double-check which vendors are actually active." It should have felt invasive. Instead, I thanked her. That's what scared me later. Not what she did, but how grateful I was for it. You never notice the first thread she pulls, because she sews it back together with something stronger. A compliment, a helpful suggestion, a favor you never asked for. And by the time you feel the tension, it's already too late to know where it started. Looking back now, there were warning signs, buried in plain sight. The way she hovered too close to closed-door meetings. The way she always knew when I'd be alone. The way she never touched a keyboard when I was watching, but my logs showed login activity anyway. And the worst part, I ignored it, because no one wants to believe they're being played by someone who makes them feel needed. Especially not when that someone is the first person in years who made you feel like you weren't disposable. The last time I saw her, before the fall, before the audit, before the whispers, she left a note on my desk. Folded. Handwritten. 2 words. Trust earned. It chilled me, because she was right. She earned it, and I was the one who handed it over. Like a key to a kingdom I didn't know she was already burning down. Permission slips to control. I used to believe manipulation came with force, the kind that pushes, demands, corners you. But Lara never pushed. She offered. Tiny permissions. Little slips of grace that felt like relief. Until one day, I woke up and realized I'd authorized my own destruction. Line by line, smile by smile, favor by favor. It began with passwords. Not in a dramatic, obvious way. No, it was casual. Necessary. I'll just reset the invoice template for you, she said. You can send me your admin credentials if you don't have time. And I didn't. Have time, I mean. Not that week. Not with the quarterly report breathing down my neck. Not with Sandra from finance botching another budget projection. Lara knew that. She knew how I got when I was overworked, overstretched, reactive. She read my moments of overwhelm like a script. So I sent her the login. Just this once. She didn't even have to ask again. The next time I left my desk to grab lunch, she'd already updated the presentation. The next time I ran late for a call, she joined early, on my account. And by the 3rd time, I stopped thinking about it altogether. That's how control works. You don't surrender it. You normalize it. She started managing my calendar. Then my teams. She said she liked making things more efficient. I didn't argue. Neither did the others. Because the results spoke louder than our gut feelings ever could. Revenue went up. Meetings got shorter. Tasks stopped slipping through the cracks. That's the terrifying brilliance of manipulation. It works until it doesn't. One afternoon, she asked if she could represent me at a senior strategy call. You don't even like those meetings, she said. Besides, you've already outlined your thoughts. I'll just echo them. I should have said no. But I said yes. Because saying yes to Lara felt like trusting a more competent version of myself. That's what she'd become, an extension of my authority. A voice that mirrored mine so precisely it was easy to forget she had her own. But of course she did. She always did. The shift was subtle, barely noticeable. She'd add little phrases I didn't use. Start replying to emails on my behalf. Use my tone, my signature, but not always my intent. At first, I blamed fatigue. I had said that, hadn't I? Or had I just meant to? The line blurred so softly that I stopped trying to trace it. Then came the confidential report. A vendor flagged a discrepancy in their contract. Said they'd been given an internal memo indicating a new set of deliverables, approved by me. Only I hadn't. When I pulled the document, the metadata showed my login credentials. The timestamp matched the day I was out sick. I called IT. They called it unusual but inconclusive. No breach. No flags. Just activity. Just me. Apparently. I sat at my desk that night, long after the building emptied. I kept asking myself the same question over and over. When did I start letting someone else speak for me? But that wasn't the real question. The real question was, when did I stop knowing the difference? And still, I didn't confront her. Because Lara had earned my trust. Hadn't she? That's what I kept telling myself. Even as I watched her navigate the office like she owned it. Even as she started making high-level calls before I could. I told myself she was helping. That she was loyal. Because that's the lie manipulation feeds you. That loyalty and obedience are the same thing. One day, I overheard her in the hallway. On the phone. Whispering. Sharp, fast syllables. Something about compliance flow and executive access. She didn't see me, and I didn't stop her. That was my last chance. I watched her walk past without saying a word, and in doing so, I gave her permission to keep going. Because by then, it wasn't just my calendar or my inbox or my authority she'd slipped into. It was my silence, and that was the loudest permission of all. Built by lies, bled by truth. They say trust is built brick by brick. But they never tell you how easy it is to mistake a wall for a fortress. Until you realize you were never inside it. You were underneath it. Crushed. And Lara, she laid the foundation. One perfect lie at a time. The promotion was announced on a Thursday. I remember the look in her eyes when the email went out, congratulating me, inviting me to the director's lounge, copying the entire damn C-suite. She smiled with her lips, but not with her eyes. I should have noticed that. Instead, I raised a glass with the others. I shook hands. I thanked the CEO with a voice that trembled from disbelief. Not because I didn't think I deserved it, but because I couldn't figure out how it happened. I'd only just cleared a major error in the last quarterly report, an error Lara had helped me catch. My reviews were strong but not exceptional. I wasn't the obvious choice. And yet, I was chosen. Later, I found out why. It started with a call from Nina, a former candidate for the same promotion. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing," she said, "but if you're going to backstab your own team, at least do it with some subtlety." I didn't understand. I asked what she meant. She said she'd been called into HR 3 weeks earlier about an anonymous report that accused her of leaking internal documents to a competitor. There was no proof, but the seed was planted. She was removed from the shortlist. 2 others dropped out days later, and somehow I remained, the only candidate left standing. At first, I thought it was office politics. Then I checked the metadata on the report Lara had typed for me 2 weeks earlier. The document she insisted I review. The one she claimed was a draft response to vendor pricing concerns. But there was more to it. Hidden in the version history were references to names. Notes about projected risks tied to specific employees. Nina's name. Marks. Stevens. Not in the body of the document. Buried in comment threads, deleted before the final version. But they'd been there. And all of them were flagged with one phrase. Not suitable for long-term trust. My blood ran cold. She hadn't written those comments for me. She'd written them for someone else. Someone watching from above. Someone with the power to pull strings once the right doubts were placed in the right ears. She hadn't cleared my path. She'd burned everyone else's. I confronted her. I waited until after hours, when the lights were dim and the hallway silent. I walked into her office, and for the first time, she didn't smile. She looked ready, like she knew this day would come. "I found the file," I said. She didn't flinch. "I found the comments. The pattern. The deletions. You sabotaged the others, Lara." She stood, smoothed her sleeves, walked past me and shut the door gently behind her, then turned back and said, "Do you think I made you who you are?" I froze. "Do you think anyone would have noticed you if I hadn't rearranged the narrative? You're good, but you're not memorable. You needed a little story arc." My voice cracked. "You lied. You destroyed people." She stepped closer, her tone low measured. "I curated outcomes. I corrected trajectories. I wanted to scream, but I didn't, because deep down, some part of me had felt this coming. Some part of me had always known the price of riding a wave you didn't create. And now I was at the crest, with no idea how to survive the fall. The next day, Nina was gone. Voluntary resignation, they said. Mark transferred departments. Stephen had stopped showing up weeks ago. And me? I was promoted, elevated, polished, and entirely alone. Because that's what manipulation does best. It isolates you, raises you above the ground just long enough for you to forget there's no one left to catch you. I sat in my office, staring at the skyline. My reflection in the glass didn't look like a man who earned his way here. It looked like a puppet, strings still dangling from limbs I thought were free. And when I turned back to my screen, a new message had arrived. From Lara. Subject, just so we're clear. Sometimes loyalty is the most effective weapon. Enjoy the view. No signature. No attachments. Just that. A final touch. A final cut. And beneath it, I felt the slow bleed of truth beginning to pool at my feet. The audit no one survives. The problem with digital footprints is they don't bleed. They don't tremble like a witness on the stand. They don't scream when you accuse them of lying. They just sit there, lines of code, files, logs, nodding back at you like you're guilty, even when you know you're not. And the thing about Lara? She didn't just know how to walk in my shadow. She knew how to code it. It started with an email from internal audit. No subject line. Just, "Please meet in room B14 at 9 a.m., urgent." I didn't think much of it. We were mid-cycle, and budget audits weren't uncommon. Annoying, sure, but routine. I walked in with my tablet, half-caffeinated, expecting a 30-minute review of petty cash flow. Instead, 3 people were already seated. Compliance, legal, and a guy I'd never seen before. He didn't introduce himself. He just opened a folder and said, "Let's begin." What followed felt less like a meeting and more like an interrogation behind glass. Access logs. approval chains, wire transfers with 6-digit totals, all pointing back to me, all authorized by me, except I hadn't touched a single one. Not the offshore vendor invoice, not the Shell account deposit, not the flagged contract, and definitely not the internal systems update that bypassed two-factor authentication, signed, time-stamped, and logged under my ID. They showed me screen captures, emails with my tone, my language, even my goddamn emojis. I stared at the screen like it was someone else's life. But it wasn't. It was mine, rewritten, and I couldn't find the edits. "Do you recognize this approval signature?" one of them asked. It was mine, but it wasn't. Not just the initials. The flow, the timing. Too fast, too precise. I would have hesitated, looked for clarification. This was clean. Too clean. I went to IT that afternoon, demanded a trace. They shrugged. No breach. No external logins. No flagged behavior from their end. "Your credentials, your machine, your history," they said. "Maybe you forgot?" Forgot? That's how far gone I was. They thought I forgot laundering 6 figures into a company that didn't exist 3 months ago. I sat in the server room, watching the blinking lights, listening to the hum of data storage units like they were mocking me. I couldn't prove what I didn't know. And Laura, she was nowhere. Her desk was cleared. Her accounts were deleted. Her Slack history wiped. She'd become a ghost with a perfect exit strategy, and I was the body she left behind. I went back through everything. Emails, notes, calendar entries, conversations that didn't feel quite right anymore, audio snippets from meetings I recorded as backup, a habit I never questioned until I heard a phrase in one of them I never remembered saying. I isolated the voice, ran it through a program. It was mine, but it wasn't. It was generated, cloned, digitally replicated. She had used an AI voice tool, something powerful, something internal. She'd probably built it herself using the recordings I'd sent her over the months, audio memos, meeting recaps, voicemail drafts. She had cloned me, and the system believed her version more than it believed the original. You can't fight an enemy who disappears before the battle starts. You can't defend yourself when the evidence is you. That night, I sat in the dark, staring at my hands, wondering if maybe I had done it. That's what manipulation does. It doesn't just rob you of your reputation. It robs you of your memory, your instincts, your certainty, until all that's left is a hollow echo of a man begging to be believed. The next morning, HR placed me on leave. No charges, no lawsuit, just silence. I was advised to lawyer up. My lawyer advised me to stay quiet. And somewhere in the distance, I imagined her, Laura, already in another city, another job, another victim, polishing her next puppet. But not this time. Not again. I wasn't going to wait for her to come back. I was going to find her. Because if I didn't, then I'd truly be nothing more than her discarded shell. The disappearance protocol. There's a name for what happens when someone vanishes without a trace, but leaves behind chaos so precise it feels choreographed. The disappearance protocol. Laura didn't just leave. She erased herself in layers, like a painting she'd been slowly covering up since the day she walked in. Every brushstroke of charm, every documented favor, every whisper she planted, it was all part of her exit. And I wasn't just watching it unfold. I was buried underneath it. I tried calling her. First cell, disconnected. Then email, bounced back. Slack, no record of her ever having an account. I walked to her old desk, now cold and empty, the chair pushed in at an exact angle. There was no trace she'd ever sat there. No forgotten pen, no crumb, no scent. Even the nameplate was gone, replaced with someone else's. She hadn't quit. She'd activated something. A routine. A plan. She had practiced this before. I tracked her through HR. Nothing. They claimed she was a contractor. No formal termination record on file. Contractor? She had clearance. Director-level access. Spoke to C-suite like she was one of them. But now, no resume. No payroll stub. No LinkedIn. Even her references, all disconnected. Like they'd never existed. She didn't just disappear from the building. She disappeared from reality. That's when I started hearing the whispers. Not from her. From others. A guy in risk who remembered her, but under a different name. A former vendor liaison who swore she once led an agile transformation team overseas. Same face, same eyes, different voice. An email thread forwarded to me anonymously. Subject: LV incident, Tokyo, 2019. One line stood out. Highly effective manipulator. Adaptive accent. Rewires internal trust networks. Cleans her trail. Do not engage. No attachments. No context. Just that. It was like discovering she wasn't one person. She was a pattern. I rented a car. Traced old addresses. Found nothing. Except in one abandoned P.O. box in a strip mall, I found a torn scrap of paper stuffed under the mailbox grate. Handwritten. Presence is never permission. I froze. I knew that phrase. She said it to me in passing once, a life lesson, she claimed. But now it felt like a rule. A warning. A code she lived by. I stopped sleeping. Started charting the timeline on my walls like a true crime investigator. Pins. Strings. Printouts of invoices, emails, financial forensics reports. Everywhere I looked, I found her fingerprints, just faint enough to be deniable. And always just one step ahead. It was as if she had built the entire network, not just to execute the manipulation, but to walk away clean. Then came the final trigger. An article, burying my name in a story I hadn't authorized. Corporate director placed on leave after internal breach, no charges filed. It didn't say my name outright, just initials. Just enough detail that anyone who knew me would know. The byline, anonymous, but the syntax, hers. Lara's writing style was unmistakable, clipped, surgical, casual in tone, yet emotionally precise. She didn't write to document facts. She wrote to redirect blame. And now, she was rewriting the final chapter of my career. I hit bottom when I realized something terrifying. She didn't just outmaneuver me. She trained me. Every manipulation, every psychological trap, every breakdown, it wasn't just about destroying my reputation. It was about repurposing me. For what? I didn't know yet. But something inside me began to shift. Something colder, sharper, focused. I wasn't going to clear my name. I was going to follow her code, learn her methods, and use them to find her. The student was gone, but the shadow she left behind was evolving. And when I caught up to her, and I wouldn't be the same man she disappeared from. Rewired for revenge. Revenge doesn't come in flames. Not the kind that manipulation teaches you. No, it arrives cold, strategic, rewired. The man I used to be, trusting, idealistic, desperate to be seen, had been dismantled piece by piece. Lara didn't just manipulate me, she reprogrammed me. And now I was learning her language. I started at the edges. Online forums where ethical hacking met influence psychology. Obscure books Lara once quoted in passing. The crowd mind, dark empathy, invisible signals. I annotated every page. Not to expose her, to understand her. Because once you've been rewritten, you don't look for justice. You look for the source code. I used burner profiles, shadow emails, VPNs laced over VPNs. I posted questions in private digital enclaves, not where is she, but who else has seen her work? Answers trickled in, encrypted voice messages, vanishing texts. A few even claimed to know her, though none used the same name. Vera, L, Nissa. The only constant? Her blueprint. She infiltrated companies, rewrote power structures from within, vanished, then repurposed her victims. Some became whistleblowers. Others took the fall. A few, like me, turned cold and quiet. The survivors didn't talk. They studied. One contact, codename Ether, sent me a zip file. No message. Just a folder titled Echo Scripts. Inside were logs, voice-cloned approvals, AI-generated memos, training data sets scraped from internal communications. She hadn't just mimicked behavior. She'd automated it. Lara had been testing the limits of digital identity manipulation, using behavioral patterning, sentiment tracking, real-time tone adaptation. She hadn't vanished. She had scaled. And somewhere out there, the version of her I knew, the one who smiled, poured coffee, left handwritten notes, was just one thread in a growing tapestry of psychological warfare. I traced the IP metadata from the zip file to a private seminar in Berlin. Topic: ethical persuasion and voice branding. Presenter alias: Dr. Lucia Verne. She was listed as a guest contributor. No recordings, no guest list, no photos, but I found a name in a footnote, an attendee from a Swiss media firm who left a comment on a related article. I reached out. He didn't respond. Until 2 weeks later, I received a USB in a manila envelope. No note, no return address. On it, footage, Shaky. Handheld. Like someone recorded it under the table. A woman on stage, same posture. Same cadence. Same presence. She was speaking about influence infrastructure. And then, she said something that stopped my breath cold. If you can echo their fears, you can author their decisions. That was a phrase she once whispered to me late one night, half joke, half prophecy. Now she was teaching it. I sat in my apartment, staring at the screen, looping the footage over and over. Not to catch her, to study her. Because she wasn't just my manipulator anymore. She was my instructor. And so I rewired. I began impersonating myself, the man she built, and used his voice to start rebuilding my reach. Internal contacts. Former colleagues. Discreet recruiters in security firms and corporate psychology circles. I wasn't looking for forgiveness anymore. I was looking for function. And the closer I got to understanding how she dismantled me, the clearer the endgame became. This wasn't about closure. It was about evolution. There was one final breadcrumb. A voice print pattern embedded in the seminar audio file, only detectable by waveform fractal analysis. Her signature. A hidden line of code, digitally sewn into the audio stream. Almost like a signature left for me. Or a challenge. I ran it through every filter I had. The pattern translated into a name. A company. A city. One I hadn't dared revisit. But there it was, embedded like a dare. New York. Division 9 Communications. Dr. L. Verne, guest architect, Cognitive Branding Lab. Lara was back. In the open. Teaching. Recruiting. Scaling. And this time, I wouldn't show up asking questions. I'd show up with her own tactics sharpened like blades. I wasn't the pawn anymore. I was the weapon she accidentally forged. And I was done playing. The final lesson. They say once you learn the patterns of a manipulator, you'll never unsee them again. What they don't say is how easy it is to become one. New York felt colder than I remembered. Not the weather, the people, the rhythm, the air itself. Every step I took toward Division 9's building, I could feel the architecture pressing in on me, sleek, mirrored, sterile. Like the kind of place that doesn't just hold secrets. It breeds them. I had an appointment. Not under my name, of course. I'd created a digital shell weeks before, a ghost persona. David Reed, freelance strategist, corporate influence specialist. Endorsed by 3 fake firms, with LinkedIn recommendations generated by AI. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was using her methods to find her. The receptionist led me to a glass-walled lounge. 2 chairs, soft lighting, music in a frequency barely audible, engineered to relax the mind. That's when I knew she was near. Manipulators don't just control the conversation. They design the environment. She entered 10 minutes later. Same gait, same quiet elegance. Different name tag, Dr. Lucia Verne. And the second her eyes met mine, I knew she knew. She didn't flinch. She didn't gasp. She didn't call security. She smiled, like a teacher welcoming back a long-lost student. Well, she said, sitting across from me. I was wondering when you'd find your way back. I studied her face, not for recognition, but for weakness. There was none. Only poise. Calculation. That same surgical confidence. I didn't come to talk, I said. Of course not, she replied. You came to demonstrate. The conversation that followed was less a reunion and more a duel. One masked by charm, cloaked in silence, sharpened by subtext. I asked her about her work. She spoke of constructive disruption. She asked me about mine. I told her I was in identity recovery. We both knew what this was. A showdown disguised as civility. I slid a file across the table. Proof of her voice cloning, her audit trail manipulation, her curated implosions. She didn't even glance at it. That's your closure? She asked, tilting her head. No, I said. That's your mirror. She leaned back, eyes glowing with something I hadn't expected, approval. Good, she said. You finally stopped seeking validation. I narrowed my eyes. You think this is a graduation? I know it is, she said calmly. You were my most complicated project. The one who asked too many questions, and still obeyed. I had to break you a very specific way. I wanted to scream, but screaming was his reaction. And I wasn't him anymore. You destroyed everything, I said. My name, my job, my peace of mind. She nodded gently. And rebuilt your purpose. You were floating. Now you're defined. There's a difference. I stared at her. Not with hatred. With understanding. That's what terrified me most. I stood. Pulled out a device. an audio emitter tuned to expose microcloned frequencies. It was recording everything, broadcasting it to 3 journalists and a corporate ethics lawyer. I smiled. Your voice isn't just power anymore. It's evidence. She looked up at me. No panic, no fear. Just that unsettling calm. Good, she whispered. Let them listen. That's the final lesson. I frowned. What? She leaned forward, voice soft, voice exactly like mine. Truth doesn't matter. Narrative does. And you, my dear, are now the most compelling narrator I've ever created. And just like that, I saw it. The final move. This wasn't revenge. It was promotion. She had handed me the script, made me the survivor, the messenger, the man who would tell the story again and again, not to expose her, but to replicate her. Because the most dangerous manipulators don't kill their enemies. They convert them. So here I am, telling you my story, warning you. But maybe I'm doing more than that. Maybe I'm showing you the blueprint. Maybe like her, I've learned how to echo fears to author decisions. And maybe the voice in your ear right now isn't warning you at all. Maybe I'm just teaching you how to spot the signs, so that next time you don't miss them. Or maybe you use them.